Hi, and welcome back as we start our exploration of blood vessels and how the blood circulates around your body. This first video is just going to be talking about structures of various blood vessels. So to get started, what you have to understand is in humans, your circulatory system is basically a system of closed tubular structures, and the blood belongs inside those tubes. Now, this is different than some other animals, okay, where they'll have tubes carry blood, and then you'll have like the blood swimming pool, and then you'll have a tube drain at the other end. In humans, the blood is always in this tubular system, and this is how we're bringing nutrients to cells as well as taking away our waste products. When we look at our blood vessels, they fall into three big categories: our arteries, our capillaries, and our veins. So artery, beginning with an A, by definition, is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. It has nothing to do with whether or not that is oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. So it has nothing to do with whether or not that blood vessel is represented by a red structure or a blue structure in drawings and in models. But an artery carries blood away from the heart. And it's usually named for the organ where the blood is going to. For instance, if it's going to your spleen, it's called the splenic artery. If it's going to your ovary, it's the ovarian artery. In contrast to that, veins are carrying blood back towards the heart, and they're also named for the organs they're draining. So just like there's a splenic artery taking blood in this direction towards your spleen on the left upper quadrant in the abdomen, there's a splenic vein which is carrying blood away from the spleen. And in between arteries and veins are our capillaries. And capillaries are where we are exchanging things, where we're dropping off nutrients and we are picking up waste. So it's going to be found in whatever that organ is, not on the outside of it, but inside it. And so when we look at arteries and veins, a lot of students have misconceptions because you see the red and the blue and all the drawings and the diagrams that arterial blood is red and venous blood is blue, especially if you look on your wrists and your hands, you can see all these blue blood vessels and you go, oh, those are veins, they contain blue blood. Hate to tell it to you, but all your blood is red, right? Every time you cut yourself, you've dripped red blood, but what you've dripped is dark red blood usually because that's your venous blood. It's been partially deoxygenated. Most of our venous blood is partially deoxygenated, whereas fully oxygenated blood would be bright red. And so arteries start out big, coming away from the heart, and then they're going to branch, just like a tree trunk branches, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it gets to the capillaries. And at the end of the capillaries, we're going to have really tiny veins, and then those are going to join together and get bigger and bigger and bigger until they come back to the heart. Okay, so let's look at these structures. So arteries and veins are similar in sizes, although you'll learn which one is bigger than the other one. You'll learn how to tell the difference. But I want to point out that both of these, even the smallest vein and the smallest artery, they're all much larger than capillaries. And always remember, if there's an artery going this way, there's almost always a vein going that way. So you find them as companions in the same location. Most of our arteries and veins are what we call end arteries. There's only one path to get to that area. If you want to go to the spleen, you got to take the splenic artery. If you want to come out of the spleen, you got to be in the splenic vein. The ovarian artery does not cruise by the spleen in case somebody wants to drop off some blood before it makes it to the ovary. If you want to go to the ovary, you got to be in the ovarian artery. But there are a few places in our body where we have anastomosis, where we have two or more arteries going to the same area to supply blood to the same area. And this is really uncommon, so I will be pointing this out later on, a couple places where it happens. So now let's look at our blood vessels wall. As I told you before, arteries and veins like to travel next to each other. So here are two blood vessels, and one of them is an artery and one of them is a vein. And by the time we're done with this video, you should be able to come back to this picture and know which one is which. So all arteries and veins have the same three layers. The innermost layer, as in the layer closest to the blood, is called the tunica intima. If you recall, that word tunica just means coat, so it's just the layer. There are three layers in the blood vessel wall. So the middle layer is known as the tunica media, and then the outermost layer is the tunica externa. So let's look at this a little bit closer. And looking at these layers, I'm going to have essentially the same diagrams where here on the left, you have arterial blood entering from above and going down below. In the middle, you have a capillary bed, and on the right, you would have venous blood coming from the bottom and going back up, and that's because where the word tunica intima is, that's where the heart would be. So arteries carrying blood away from the heart, the veins carrying blood back towards the heart. So in the tunica intima, this has a surface, right? And what type of tissue covers every surface in our body? That's right, epithelial tissue. So because it's on the inside of the blood vessels, we actually don't call it epithelium. We call this specific part of the tunica intima, we call it the endothelium because it's on the inside. And this is a simple squamous epithelium. And because this is the thinnest epithelium, so it's the easiest for things to cross, especially our gases. Also in the tunica intima, only on the arterial side is this layer that looks a little bit like Swiss cheese. In their diagram, it doesn't look like Swiss cheese in real life. But what it is, it's a layer that has a whole bunch of elastic fibers. And this layer is called the internal elastic lamina. And so the reason why it's called the internal elastic lamina, because there's going to be one that is on the outside of that later on. That's it for the tunica intima. Now, for the tunica media, you can tell you have hit this layer as you continue outward once you start seeing some smooth muscle, okay? So even on the venous side, we had the endothelium, we had a little bit of connective tissue, and then we have our smooth muscle layer. So the smooth muscle is the most important component of the tunica media. And I want to point out that in your blood vessels, this has only sympathetic nervous system innervation, which means when it's innervated, the muscle will contract. So if it's going around like this, it will make the blood vessel diameter smaller. And that's how it is everywhere in your body except for the penis and clitoris. So for now, just think this is where everywhere in your body. And then when we come back and we do repro at the end of the semester, then I will remind you how that works because it's different. So only sympathetic stimulation and to the smooth muscle of the tunica media. On the arterial side, once again, we have this layer that looks Swiss cheesy, and this is another thicker layer of elastic tissue known as the external elastic lamina. Going deep to that, we are in the tunica externa, which is just a regular connective tissue, except in our large vessels, such as those great vessels in the thorax, the aorta, the superior inferior vena cava, those big blood vessels, because the blood vessel wall is so thick, it needs its own little blood vessels to bring nutrients to the tissues in the wall. And the names of these blood vessels are called the vasa vasorum, which just means the blood vessels of the blood vessels. So it's kind of a cool name. So that's it for the structure of arteries and veins. Notice the differences between the two, but let's look at capillary structures, where capillaries, that connecting between the arteries and the veins. When we look at their wall, there's no tunica intima, tunica media, tunica externa. The wall is one cell layer. Okay, so it's just that simple squamous endothelium and its basement membrane. That's all there is in a capillary. Okay. So make yourself a table like this where you're comparing arteries, veins, and capillaries, and also like what is the oxygen content in a systemic artery versus a pulmonary artery. I know you don't know those words just yet, but you will very shortly. And with that, we are done with this introduction to blood vessels, and I will see you again shortly. Thank you.